So please join me in welcoming Chad Littlefield.
Jack Henry Connect. How many of you have connected with one other person that you have not met before you showed up here? Hey, we're like on the track. It's part of the reason we show up to a thing like this.
Typically we think keynote, we think person speaks to audience, audience sponges up that content. And I would argue that if you want to lead the best conference opening possible, that you've got to design your opening for contribution, not just consumption. Engage people, right? Notice how in the first clip, the first thing that I said on stage to 3,000 people was a question that actually invited their response and participation. Turned out, by the way, you might not have been able to see them, but it turned out that all 3,000 people raised their hands, right? Immediately, everybody's present with me in that moment and wondering what's happening next. And maybe so are you. So this video is actually mostly just me showing you the first 5 minutes of one of my keynotes so that you can see how, very specifically, I engage a group and frame up what's about to happen next. After you watch this clip, I'll come back and share one of my favorite stories from one of the most laughable, positive conference openings in my recent memory. Enjoy past me.
Jack Henry Connect. How many of you have connected with one other person that you have not met before you showed up here? Hey, we're like on the track. It's part of the reason we show up to a thing like this. So that moment that Dave and I just had, shaking hands, when you meet another human being for the very first time, what questions do you typically ask? Just popcorn them out. What questions do you typically ask?
How are you?
How are you? Where are you from? What do you do? Name, where you're from again, go back to that. It's amazing. We're in a room full, I haven't met you all yet, but we're in a room full of about 3,000 pretty sharp people. And yet, when we meet somebody, when we line up with a lifetime of ungoogleable experience, we tend to pull out about 1 to 4 questions that we always ask. So my question to you today is, what happens if we don't ask those questions? What happens if we meet each other and we don't ask the questions that we typically ask? And so we're going to do an experiment in what happens. But first, I called you all smart, and even though the vast majority of you have titles like VP, AVP, EVP, LMNOP, QRS, TUV, let's do a little bit of math, all right? I think you're like, any math people in the room? So I want to do some internal math and then some public math. I'm going to ask you to do the public math, though, not me. So in your head, can you calculate the number of years of experience that you have in your world? And I'm not going to fact check you, so come up with that and shout a bunch out. I'm going to listen for them. 31, 43, 12, 20, 25. Okay, so we got like the pride of people 20 years of experience over. Who has like 2 years of experience? Anybody? Who's like, be proud, you have your whole career ahead of you. So here's the public math part. So just from the numbers that you heard, and this is some very loose math, but from the numbers you just heard, what would you guess is the average number of years of experience in this room? 15, 9, 25. Let's go, just for math's sake, let's say 20. So if we have an average roughly of 20 years of experience, each person in this room, and roughly 3,000 people, by my public math, that is 60,000 years of experience sitting on this side of the stage. And so I'm entering this space with a great deal of humility and the perspective that you are the expert of your own world. And I'm going to try to spend 0 minutes pretending that I know your life and your world and your community bank or credit union better than you do. I'm going to spend all of our time creating an experience in what happens when we shift up our questions. And so I want to tell you a story about a time 9 years ago where I was asked a question that greatly changed my world. So about 15 minutes before I'm getting married, I'm sitting outside at this little arboretum garden thing, and my heart rate's kind of going, because like this is kind of a big decision. And everybody's coming up and sharing some nicety, some version of congratulations, so happy for you, except for one person. His name is Jeff. He walked up to me and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Are you present? Because you really don't want to miss your own wedding." I was like, oh. I feel like I won the lottery with that question. Because if he didn't ask me that question, I would have been there, right? My body would have moved all the places. I would have ended up with this, but I wouldn't have really been there. And so I don't know you well enough to put my hand on your shoulder yet. But metaphorically speaking, I'm going to ask you, are you present? Because for the next few days, you have access to roughly 60,000 years of experience.
Beautiful. Notice that beginning, it was all like quick, fairly easy to answer questions, things that were engaging. And what I was doing is warming people up for the framing, for the big event, which was actually where everybody had one of these cards sitting on their seat, and we did a 3,000 person question swap where people were up and exchanging answers. But notice how I didn't just start with that. That'd be really overwhelming to a group. I built up to it. I created framing around it. I created the importance of it, told a story that situated people there. And so thinking about your conference opening, is there some low-hanging fruit participation that you can build to like a moment like question swap? If you want to see that exercise actually happening somewhere on my website or in the connected conference link below, you'll be able to see a clip of that exercise actually happening in live time. Now I will say one of my absolute favorite conference moments that was serendipitous, couldn't have possibly planned it. It was a surprise and a delight to me and a surprise and a delight to the audience. But I was speaking in Kentucky to every superintendent and school principal and school leader, just about in Kentucky. So it was a big group of people, and we were doing an opening question swap with these cards. And one of the sponsors of the event, American Fidelity, thank you, sponsored a deck of cards for everybody in the audience. Now, I had just used these with a bunch of educators who were like, these cards are really cool. In fact, a bunch of the group said that they were like logged onto the website to figure out how to get them in the middle of the keynote. And then I asked the whole group, I said, raise your hand if you have the question, what is one thing life is teaching you right now? That big blue card that you saw me holding up. And everybody who had that card raised their hand, and I said, congratulations, you all get a deck of free We Connect cards. And the whole group was like, this is awesome, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, well, actually, hold on a second. Thank you to American Fidelity. Everybody gets a deck of these cards. And it was just like spontaneous. I didn't plan on sharing it like that. I didn't even plan on rolling it out like that. It just came up in the moment, which is part of the beautiful magic of conferences, is all the spontaneous human moments. And this group went insane, like just chatter, happiness, smiles for like 5 to 7 full minutes while 30 volunteers ran around handing out and tossing out decks. It was like, was a point in my life where I felt most like Oprah, like you get a deck and you get a deck. But there's just a really beautiful, uplifting moment. And so the way that you can steal that and repeat it into your own event is, I mean, sure you can buy cards, but also just think about what's your conference, what is a gift that you can give to somebody to just absolutely delight and elate them that's tied to the purpose of what they're really doing. Not talking about a water bottle or a notebook with the logo on it. What is something deeper, a little bit more meaningful, practical, useful that they can put to work after that conference? Last thing, because I'm bad at goodbyes, let's do the quick math of how many connections were made in that room in the opening that you saw. When we went to do a question swap, 3,000 people there. Each person in that exercise had roughly, on average, about 5 interactions. And so in the span of about 10 to 15 minutes, we created 15,000 conversations and connections that never otherwise would have happened. It was like, it's pretty cool to create a moment where that many people have the opportunity of winning the conversational lottery and have a conversation that just totally changes their perspective of the world. I'm Chad. If you want me to help make your conference awesome, this is what I get to do also for a living. Check the link below. Have an awesome day.